Welcome to the sanctuary. I'm Kyle, and I'm here to tell you, never be afraid, step into the pleasure den of the absurd. Now we're going to have a regular weekly segment. Yay! It's about time. Well, yes, it is about time, because it was getting kind of hard to think of topics to discuss, and even if it was easy to have a topic to discuss or something to show, sometimes my enthusiasm wasn't there. But I decided to get something weird video into the mix here, because in my humble opinion, it's the greatest video company ever. And since 1990. Now, what is something weird? Well, right around that time of 1990, these conventions started happening, Chiller Theater. And at that time, they were held at Fairleigh Dickinson University's gymnasium. And half of the gym was like vendors and people signing autographs and stuff like that. And one of the vendors was this outfit, Something Weird Video. And they get their name from the title of a film by a director whose output they were instrumental in distributing to the public, and that is Herschel Gordon Lewis. He made this film Something Weird, but Something Weird Video was formed by a guy named Mike Vraney. The late Mike Vraney, he's no longer with us, but man, his legacy still shines on to this day in 2023. And it's being taken care of by his widow, Lisa Petrucci. I hope I said that name right. I'm always worried that I'm saying it wrong. But Mike and Lisa and their team who distributed this stuff have brought so much joy into my life and those of my friends. We would, I'd go to these conventions and at, back in the early 90s, I mean, you're talking getting stuff on videotape, and there was no DVDs yet, and it was this burgeoning interest in old films, not just old films, but certain types of old films. The taboo films of the 30s, the road, what they call roadshow movies, because if these movies weren't shown in a theater, a local theater, the producers would, drive into local towns, set up a tent, and they would show these movies there. And what type of movies were these? Well, we're talking like 1930s, 1940s, and you're talking movies about crime and drugs and like marijuana and sexually transmitted diseases, which usually ended up in like the birth of a baby. Yes, you would actually see a birth of a baby, and they would advertise such things to lure people into the theater. Sometimes they would have somebody there like who was like an expert in bodily hygiene and biology and whatnot, who had these manuals to tell you about your body and how that worked. They would sell these to the crowd. Sometimes the crowds were segregated. They would have just mothers and daughters there one night. Sometimes they have father and sons. But not only that kind of stuff. I mean, they had geez, yeah, marijuana movies, just odd horror movies, you know, little peekaboo movies, burlesque movies, and juvenile delinquency and stuff like that, and these genres of films, these topics, well, were a boon to independent producers and filmmakers, throughout from the 1930s all the way up through the 1970s. And it's that sort of range of years that Something Weird kind of hosts a lot of. I mean, it's not just that kind of stuff. I mean, they've got industrial films, police training films, all sorts of public awareness stuff, Christian films, and cartoons, commercials, kids commercials, beer commercials, all sorts of trailers and stuff like that. Here's some of the names of some of the filmmakers that they specialize in. Dave Friedman, Herschel Gordon Lewis, Doris Wishman, Joe Sarno, Barry Mahon, all sorts of stuff. And it's quite a, not only when you learn about the history of these films and how they were distributed, how they were, there was no ratings board back then. Each state had their own sort of state censorship board, and so they would, if they caught wind of some of these films, they'd be like, well, you got to take this out, you got to take that out, make it a little bit more clean, So that's when, they would have the last reel of the film ready. It was called a square up reel, and that's where, you gave the public what they wanted, as far as, whatever story they were telling, and so if you're aware of these names, you know what I'm talking about. If you're the kind of person these days who, gets a heart all aflutter if somebody says a certain word or does a certain action or talks about a certain topic, well, these probably aren't for you. You'll be heavily triggered. But for me, I enjoy this stuff, and I enjoy what they put out. And so ever since, the early 90s, going to these chiller theater conventions, Something Weird has been there with new stuff all the time. And so I'm just here to introduce Something Weird, what they're about. It's a sick, sick, sick world. And, and also too, they brought back all these films from obscurity single-handedly. And they made money for whoever had the rights to these old films, and I mean, they actually got a hold of the films themselves, and so that's why all these names, are highlighted, and they took care of those guys, and it was, like I say, a big boom, and then in early 90s, mid 90s, it became, all these films and filmmakers became such a thing that, Tim Burton made a film about Ed Wood. The author of the Ed Wood biography, Rudolph Gray, was at one of these early Chiller shows. My brother got a picture with him. He was just walking around, and all these guys were just walking around, and it was great. So, you know, they're still around, and there's their address and the website. Hope you can read that. And they do offer DVDs, Blu-rays, digital downloads. And not only that, they have films that were distributed on DVD by Image Entertainment. They're lending their prints out to other boutique DVD labels, Kino, Alternative Cinema, the American Film Genre Archive, and just a whole bunch of other places. So it's a whole new wave, whole new crowd. I do believe they're streaming, but I just wanted to show you some of the things that I have here, and you know, I love movie trailers. I did a whole video of pretty much all the trailer compilation DVDs and Blu-rays that I have, and Something Weird put out this 10 set volume of trailers. Now, originally when we would go to Chiller Theater, they were selling these things on videotape, you know, these trailers, and they would offer these things, which some of you might be aware of. Look at this. You know what this is? Yes, this is a cassette. And these are like radio spots for all these weird movies, man. And, you know, I just happen to have these two floating around. And yes, I do have something to play them on. I love radio spots. I love trailers. They're putting stuff out on Blu-ray. Here's one of their filmmakers they highlight, Doris Wishman. And the great thing about Something Weird too is not only do you get these films, but usually for the most part they will put on a whole bunch of extras and leave you thoroughly satisfied. This Doris Wishman here has 3 of her most infamous films from the early 70s, and you get a whole like trailer reel of her stuff. Here's another infamous, the first 3 movies, the Blood trilogy of Herschel Gordon Lewis and Dave Friedman. Blood Feast is a historic film. It's the first American film to ever feature gore in color. and this is the most infamous scene here, where the girl gets her tongue ripped out. And you know, these were made in the early 60s, and you know, this was a 2-man crew. Herschel did the camera work, and Dave Friedman did the sound, and they would edit it up, and they made movie history together. And that's just some of the films that they did. But you know, so they're on Blu-ray. Here's the Kino label. They specialize in a lot of you know, art films and mainstream films, and Something Weird is lending in their prints. These are 2 films from the 1930s made by an infamous filmmaker. His name is Dwayne Esper. There's one of those marijuana propaganda films. This one is really good. These are 2 films that I actually enjoy. I mean, they can be kind of, well, especially in the case of Narcotic, there's some, you know, scenes that are static and whatnot, you know, the early 1930s, some stock footage and whatnot, but man, does it tell quite a story. Another favorite, I mean, and I mean, they got a whole series of police training films from the 50s, 60s, 70s. These are films that were produced to show to police officers, you know, on a variety of topics, you know, and so they got that going on. As I said, Herschel Gordon Lewis and and Dave Friedman, you know, they weren't really looking to be, you know, film auteurs. They were just a couple of guys who knew about making movies, and they wanted in on the fun, you know. I mean, these guys just made their films, and they made a lot of money, you know, because they would, you know, especially in the early 60s, 1960, 61, 62, they made a lot of, there was a lot of nudist films that were all the rage, because the Supreme Court ruled that nudity itself was not a crime. So boom, you had all these, you know, nudist camp movies, and just to show, you know, like nature in the raw. And here's one of them here, that Herschel Gordon Lewis and Dave Friedman did. This is actually one of my favorites. They made a whole ton of these types of movies. Russ Meyer made the first one, The Immoral Mr. Tease, and that made a boatload of money. And you know, you got to remember, back then people were going to the theaters. You know, they were entertained by these things. And sometimes, you know, these films were made for specialty houses, you know, or they would play at burlesque theaters, you know, in between the acts on stage and stuff like that. Or, you know, wherever it could be shown, it was shown, you know. And here's another one. This is from 1952, Virgin in Hollywood, a little peekaboo type of movie, you know. And it's completely harmless, and, you know, but this is why I love these. I love old films. You know, it's historical, really. Not only is it American filmmaking history, but it's American history itself, and as how these films were rated and or censored, advertised, shown, the topics they were talking about, real sometimes heavy-handed stuff. And you know, it made an impact, you know. And again, these are real independent filmmakers, you know. This isn't maybe sometimes, you know, as you know, what happened was in the late 60s, Russ Meyer was making so much money as an independent filmmaker. He was producing his own films. I mean, he was writing the scripts, he was producing, he was the cinematographer, he was doing the editing. I mean, he was a one-man show, and he was an auteur. I mean, that guy wanted to make films, and he wanted to make money, and boy, did he ever. And, you know, it was because of that the major motion picture studios were taking notice. Russ Meyer saved 20th Century Fox from bankruptcy. They're like, hey man, this independent guy made this film and made X amount of money in profit, you know, get him. And they did. And he and Roger Ebert, yes, that infamous film critic Roger Ebert, who was Russ Meyer's friend, they teamed up, wrote a screenplay, made this wild movie called Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And that movie made so much money, it saved 20th Century Fox. And so, you know, and that's why, like, eventually some of these independent filmmakers would get, you know, their stuff distributed by you know, a major motion picture outlet, you know, and and then eventually the major motion pictures just started making their own types, like you know, like Jaws, Animal House, this kind of stuff, you know, and eventually, you know, the independent filmmaker, as they were, got sort of marginalized, you know. And but here's just a couple of my favorite films. These are from Image Entertainment. You get a double bill: The Violent Years, with a script by Ed Wood. But this is the film Girl Gang. Oh man, one of my favorite movies of all time. I saw it in the theater at the Film Forum in New York City many years ago. And this film is great. And, you know, and it's, like I say, it's a drive-in type of feature. And, you know, for those that don't know, the drive-in was where you would drive into a field. There was a giant screen. You'd put a speaker on your window rolled down, and they would run stuff on the screen, like advertisements, and keep telling you like what was at the snack bar. So, you know, the snack bar was fully stocked with all kinds of stuff, and they would show movie trailers and like short films and you know, all kinds of stuff. And so this replicates the experience. You know, you get the whole experience of being at the drive-in, what you would see. And again, it's all filled with extras, and that's a great thing. Here's another one that I love. This is Herschel Gordon Lewis double feature, 1968's Just for the Hell of It, and 1967's Blast Off Girls. Blast Off Girls, Herschel Gordon Lewis said, was his sort of version of Hard Day's Night. It's all about a rock band who's getting you know, mistreated by their manager, and you know, and it's quite an interesting film. You know, by this time Herschel's films were getting a little bit better, and he had a film crew that worked with him on these films. So he had a team, and he had a team of actors, and he made fun stuff, you know, and I love that one. And so, like I say, Something Weird not only is showing their prints, not only sharing their prints with other distributors who are releasing them on Blu-ray. They're also branching out with Modern Harmonic Record Company and putting out their own line of records. You know, this is a nice Halloween compilation. And the cool thing about these records is not just the fact that they come with like a booklet or on colored vinyl or whatever, but lots of times they'll come with DVDs. You know, look at this, Something Weird's Greatest Hits. You know, they got here's some of the ad art from some of their movies. Great movies. Shanty Tramp, great movie. Bummer, that's another good one. You know, all this stuff. Look at this. And the Flesh movies, man, those are wild. Kiss of Her Flesh, Touch of Her Flesh, you know, The Curse of Her Flesh. Those are pretty wild flicks. And again, you know, not only do you get this stuff, but in many cases they're giving you the movie on a DVD. And not only does it have the movie, but it'll just have the parts where, you know, of the soundtrack that's on the record. You know, they'll have an edit of the film like that. Again, Doris Wishman, you know, everybody keeps talking about, oh, women aren't represented in films. Well, you know, Doris Wishman was an independent filmmaker on her own, and, you know, you can't deny that, you know, let alone people like Ida Lupino and Anna Mae Wong before her. and later on you had Roberta Findlay, you know. So sometimes some of the things they're talking about nowadays just don't make sense, you know. And so anyway, you know, Something Weird. All kinds of stuff in the collection, you know. Dracula, the Dirty Old Man, Doris Wishman, Space Thing. It's a Revolution Mother. Boy, check this movie out. It's a Revolution Mother. And see how that compares to modern day times in 2020. It's sort of about the biker culture, the counterculture of, you know, the late 60s, early 70s. And, you know, things aren't much different, you know, psychedelic kicks, psychedelic sex kicks. You know, this one, Mr. Peter's Pets, has a real nice jazz soundtrack. You know, it's just like piano, drums, upright bass. It's real nice. Party girls. These are the same musicians that did the Dracula the Dirty Old Man soundtrack. But with that, you know, I'll be doing a regular segment. I'll be talking about all these things in better detail later on. This is just an introduction to get you guys into what kind of a sick world is contained in Something Weird Video. And with that, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And never be afraid to get weird in the pleasure den of the absurd.